And you might, again, just stretch up, let out any sounds. Oh, I'm really happy to have this time with you. Thank you for your time and attention. Feeling old. As I was reflecting on a story I might share about cultivating rapture or happiness or joy, I was thinking about this one time, way back when, in my ashram days, I wrote a lot of copy. And I had one of the first computers, the Tandy TRS-80. It was a Radio Shack computer. And it had these things called floppy disks. And so you'd be writing and it was so slow. You'd be typing and it would go copying to the disk. It didn't have an autosave function, unfortunately. And one morning I had to write a brochure, and I just sat down and I just went nuts on this thing. 3 hours straight, just cranking on getting this copy done. It was in one of those flow modes, where you can do in 3 hours what normally takes you 8. And I was about, I'd say 95% done when I moved my foot and I ended up unplugging the computer. I pulled the cord out I was wearing winter boots. And I did what I thought was best, which was to plug the computer back in and then start in and just start from the beginning. Now, I was a little frustrated. I was definitely angry with myself, but I just knew what I had to do. Like, there it was, just do it. And so I just wrote like a maniac. And at one point, as I'm reconstructing this entire brochure and writing it out, I was so absorbed in the whole process, I just kind of asked myself, well, how are you feeling right now? And I thought, I feel really happy. I feel kind of joyful. And it was so interesting to me that I was really deeply absorbed into kind of recreating this. And actually it was kind of interesting because I'd just written it, so writing it again, there were refinements and connections I was making. And it was just a profound insight for me that happiness is kind of a weird thing. It's not necessarily dependent on externals. It's about the internal experience. I'd like to talk a little bit about joy, rapture, happiness, and how it ties into these 7 factors of awakening we've been exploring. I'd like to talk a little bit about the trap we fall into of chasing it. I'd like to talk about how turning your attention to joy and rapture can help you feel more whole in general. How joy is not necessarily about adding anything to your life, and what it means to increase your capacity for joy. So the word for joy, and the original word of the Buddha, is piti, P-I-T-I, and it refers to a sense of happiness. Rapture is a really, really cool word. I really like the word rapture, which is kind of this upwelling of well-being. I've been meditating for a long time, and I never thought of meditation as something that was really connected to rapture or joy or happiness. Definitely, I was feeling happier in my life as a result of a steady practice. I was aware I would have more kind of random happy attacks than I did before. But it wasn't until I was on a month-long retreat where I got a very deep taste of the rapture and joy that arises through concentration and absorption. So during this retreat, like on any time we meditate, just noticing thought coming back, noticing thought coming back. But after a while, it's like this puppy of the mind. You tell the puppy to sit and it runs off, and you bring the puppy back, you tell it to sit. Over time, with compassion and practice, the puppy starts to sit for longer and longer periods of time. And so I noticed that as I was getting more aware of the sense of the breath and bringing in more of a sense of well-being and connection, there was this kind of upwelling of happiness. It was very much of an embodied feeling. And it's very much connected to how I like to think of meditation. First, we use focus, concentration to gather. And then you open to a sense of flow, awareness of what's changing. And then you just sense, well, can I just let it all go? Or can I let it all be? It's so powerful. And even now, if you just, we'll do a 60-second check-in. If you like, you can close your eyes and take 3 slow, deep breaths and notice how intimately you can feel those breaths on the inside. Can you sense the movement of the breath? And is it possible to actually widen your awareness to the perception of everything that's changing? Things are changing inside you, but also they're changing all around you. And can you let go? Can you be intimately aware of the breath, but also the space of change? So if you like, you can open your eyes and you can deepen your breath. Our practice is awareness of what's arising from this matrix of the body and mind. So when you see a form, when you hear a sound, when you perceive an odor, when you taste a flavor, when you feel something, when you're aware of an idea, they're very powerful. And with all these sense objects and mental objects, there can be a lot of pleasure in just noticing the experience of here and now. But then we recognize that it's just passing phenomena. It's just material passing through. An interesting thing is, as you begin to deepen your meditation practice, there are a number of things become a little more clear. And one is you become more aware of what gets in the way of being present. You know, these hindrances, or sometimes they're referred to as kind of the coverings, what covers natural awareness. You notice when aversion, anger, judgment, blame come in as a filter. When craving, wanting, fantasy, planning are the filter through which you're viewing. Or you may notice the mind restless and worry, or you may notice the heavy, sleepy, slothful mind, or a mind paralyzed by doubt or fear. You become more aware of the filters. And becoming more aware is amazing, because you begin to recognize that, yes, there is anger, but you're not your anger. That you're the awareness of the anger. Yes, the mind is restless, but you're not the restlessness. You're the awareness of the restlessness. One of the interesting things in meditation is you start practicing and you realize how distracted you are all the time. And we forget that that's huge. Just noticing you're distracted it's kind of an invitation for some mild to moderate celebration. Which is why I always find it helpful when I notice my mind lost in thought for the 15th time in the first minute of a meditation. Wow, I can celebrate that. I just woke up out of this trance of thinking. So recognizing that you're distracted is huge. And then you may notice that there are times when you may experience a real sense of joy in your body. There's this practice of opening and relaxation and softening again and again. It can feel so refreshing. Have you ever had those moments where you're just tied up in a knot, some cognitive process, and then you realize, oh, let me come back to the body, and there's this satisfying feeling of like coming home again. And that's where this experience of rapture and meditation, or joy in meditation, is so powerful. There's like this sense of like, I'm here and this feels so good. There's nowhere to go but here. It happens at random. We can create a space for it to occur. Sometimes this is referred to as rapture of the body. But then there's this other quality of joy, which is rapture not of the body, and it's more of a mental quality. It's how you're aware, a certain kind of joy that arises when you feel contentment, when you're really here for the experience, no matter what it is. This quality of joy is really interesting because it's not connected to the sensations. Sometimes it's connected to the sensations, and they may be unpleasant, but there's a quality of allowing there. As I like to say in yoga, when you're going into a yoga posture, you're going to that place where it hurts good. It kind of hurts, but it's like, this is important, and I should pay attention to this. Like, it feels right to be with this sense of discomfort. So maybe joy isn't the right word, but there's a recognition that there's something here that's opening you to a greater sense of aliveness. There's a kind of a ripeness. Like, it feels right to be here. It doesn't feel right to close down or react. You keep opening to the stress. You keep opening to the suffering. And there's some kind of ineffable kind of joy or satisfaction that arises when you're on the edge of something difficult and on the edge of something challenging. So these two kinds of joy come into play in meditation, but in life all the time. The joy that arises as a felt sense of aliveness in the body, and the joy that is more of a mental state. But both of them require, you need to be here in the present moment. You need to be interested and kind of motivated to settle into it. And you learn to kind of trust this over time, like a curiosity, like, so what is this? What is this that's arising? It doesn't feel good, but it feels important. And when that happens, you can begin to get more absorbed into the details. And you choose to be with the difficulty. It's kind of saying yes to what arises. It's saying, even learning how to say yes to what's difficult, what's painful. And this is part of how opening to what arises can cultivate a sense of more joy and wholesome qualities in your life. Back in my spiritual community days, I was remembering that I would take on certain disciplines. And in yoga philosophy, there are the yamas and niyamas, which are observances and restraints that are very, very powerful for opening you into greater awareness. And one of them is called santosh, or contentment. And I chose this as my practice. I'm going to practice contentment. Of course, this immediately highlighted my negativity bias, how I was constantly on guard for what might threaten my well-being, and all my complaints and pettiness were suddenly kind of on display because I was more aware of them. And I started to sort of practice the sense of thank you, just gratitude. Thank you for this. And sometimes it was, thank you for this amazing meal, or sometimes it was thank you for this wonderful growth opportunity. And I got to practice this recently. Sometimes, living in a house, things just fall apart, and everything started falling apart at the same time. Multiple computer issues. I have a lot of media from video and photography, and suddenly 2 hard drives filled up, and I had to figure out all the backup stuff, and then we had a water tank that blew, and diagnosing that and taking care of that. And I realized I was getting tight and I was getting resentful, and I thought, all right, so can I say yes to this? Can I just look for the joy here? So with the water tank, I contacted the company at 6:30 in the morning. I just sent an email, a little fair warning before I called, and sent that at 6:30, and at 6:45, I got an email back saying, we're on it, we're going to get someone on there, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. So I emailed back and I said, you're up early. And we had a little chat. The the woman who was coordinating everything. And I thanked her, and she was very pleasant, and it suddenly became this way of reflecting the goodness back to her, and someone came to work on it, and we had a good connection, and it was handled. And I realized that just saying yes to the difficulty turns something from a tight knot into like, hey, these are really good people doing a really good job. I'm so grateful for their time. I'm so grateful they can handle it. So the yes meditation, if you've ever sat with Tara, chances are you've practiced this, but I find it a really, really helpful reminder. So this is about a 2-minute little reflection here, maybe even less. If you like, you can close your eyes, and if you would, just think of something challenging in your life right now. It could be a minor annoyance. It could be one of the bigger ones. And take a moment just to bring it alive. That is to say, could you create a visual representation of this issue? Either as a picture or a movie clip. Are there any words or tone of voice or sounds you associate with it? And what does it feel like on the inside when you think about this challenge, this difficulty? How does your nervous system hold this source of stress? And as you just begin to sense what it feels like inside, sense what it's like to say no to it. What does it feel like when you say no, when you want to push it away or push it down, or what's that like inside? And you might intensify that no. And what does it feel like to say yes to it? If you were to say yes, more of an allowing, and just track what that feels like for the next few breaths. And if you like, you can deepen your breath. Quite often when, you can open your eyes if you like, or remain with them closed. Quite often, there are a number of things folks notice in this meditation, and I notice for myself that saying no is usually a tightening. There's some kind of like a clenching or shutting down. And sometimes saying yes is more of like a softening, more of an allowing. And sometimes no is very empowering. No, I'm not going to feel it, or I'm not going to allow this. And sometimes yes can feel like it's almost doesn't feel right. So there's no black and white here. Sometimes when you say yes to it, you actually start feeling the intensity of it, or it feels worse because it's almost like your system is saying, okay, let's make room for it so we can allow it and let it go, or let it be. So while this is not a black or white practice, there is something about when it feels right to say yes. Just to say yes to this next breath on the inside. To say yes to that pile of dishes. To say yes to walking down the street or having a task. It's a different approach to life. Again, yes is not always the right answer. Sometimes no is definitely a more conscious approach, but it can cultivate in meditation and in life kind of a gliding, sort of like getting into a groove. Just to say yes to what is here, to choose to be with it. This is very easy for me to talk about, but it's not so easy when the going gets rough. But we can train ourselves to cultivate more of this, wow, yeah, let me be with this. As Werner Erhard, the founder of EST, said, the quickest way to be happy is to choose what you already have. Such a powerful statement. And in meditation, it's choosing this breath. It's choosing this moment just as it is. Meditative joy and rapture doesn't come fast, and it's not permanent. But it's essentially not in conflict with what is happening, but actually agreeing to your experiences. As one wise teacher said, meditation is a practice of consent. You're consenting to your experience. It seems to be the doorway here. So there's something here about consenting to your experience, but there's also something about releasing into your experience. There was a long period of my life where I just was fantasizing about what it would be like to be a professional boogie boarder. I just love boogie boarding. I think at 6'5", I'm not cut out for surfing, but boogie boarding I can handle. And there's something about that experience when I just turn into a 6-year-old. You know what it's like? I get absolutely exhausted, but I get an amazing ride and I just want to run out there again. When you're on the wave and you feel that wave rising and you're just perfectly positioned on the wave, and then you surrender. You just surrender to the wave, and here's this energy taking you on this amazing ride. It's just so blissful. So much joy in surrendering, which really brings up a very interesting thing. Is it possible that joy and happiness and rapture are not about adding things to your life, but they're more about letting go? It's actually when we let go of things is when we can quite often feel a sense of deep, deep and abiding happiness. Of course, the Buddha talked about this at length, that we're all looking for happiness in exactly the wrong way. We're looking for happiness by trying to fulfill our senses, which is like building a skyscraper on sand. As far as I can tell, as I like to say, material things will not make you happy with the exception of some Apple products. And so the question becomes, how is letting go tied into cultivating a greater sense of joy? The other day I was really bugged that someone didn't get back to me. And it was just sticking around in my mind. And I noticed in my meditation that I was obsessing on this a little bit. And then I just saw the tension, and I asked myself, well, so what if this wasn't a problem? What if this wasn't an issue? Could I let it go? It reminded me of something a teacher, Les Levinson, talked about in his life. He went through a very transformational process. And he said there are 3 questions that can be very, very helpful when you notice yourself really hanging on to something. First, you need to acknowledge you're hanging on to it. But then you need to ask yourself first, could I let it go right now? The next question is, if I could let it go, well, would I? And then the next question is, well, when would I let it go? There's a brilliance to these questions. The first one is, well, could I let it go? It's very powerful, because as soon as you ask the question, you have to sort of imagine that maybe you could. But sometimes we can't. Something's hanging on. Then the next question, well, if you could let it go, would you? Well, that's a little more of a spacious inquiry. And then when opens up a way of just sort of streaming attention toward the possibility of letting go. So again, a short little reflection. You can close your eyes and take 3 slow, deep breaths. And if you would, think about something minor. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, of 4, or maybe a 5, some complaint that you've got in your life. And if you can, feel it. Feel what it's like inside, and just to ask yourself, could you let this go? If you could let it go, would you? And is there a sense of when you would let this go? And just take a moment to sense, if you could let this go, what would that feel like? What would that be like? If you like, you can deepen your breath and you can open your eyes. Part of the remembrance here is that happiness or rapture, it doesn't come through grasping or holding on to things, but actually by giving them up. It's this sort of detached or letting go attitude toward the world and toward your life that actually is what brings about the sense of joy and rapture and happiness. Or we had a poster at home when I was a kid that said, you're not happy in regard to what you can afford, but about what you can afford to let go of. Letting go, intimately tied into joy. Letting go of your preferences. Saying yes to what arises. So if you really let go, if you really let be, what arises? And quite often there can be a sense of fear or anxiety. Well, if I just let everything be, well, then I wouldn't be motivated. I wouldn't get anything done. But if you stay with it, kind of under that, there can be a real vast sense of allowing, that there's underneath all the striving, the motivation from fear, the motivation from desire, the motivation from confusion, there can be a sense of presence that's transcendent to it all. As I like to say, if you were an A student or you wanted to be an A student, if you think about the C students, they had so much fun. C students would just show up, and if it resonated, great. If it didn't, not a big deal. It's kind of tied in about letting go. So it may feel a little paradoxical to be talking about rapture and joy in a time of so much stress in our culture right now. Our cultural upheaval, the deep, deep wounds in our culture are now coming to the surface. So much pain being expressed, so much polarization, so much fear around the pandemic, people losing jobs. Really, really so challenging. But when we live in a reactive pattern of fear, we have no capacity to respond with creativity and with joy. Not that it is all easy when you're traumatized by what's going on, but part of our work is to find a way to come back to mindfulness, to come back to non-judging awareness so that we can begin to respond to what is arising in our lives. And paradoxically, there are those who are without jobs, those who are very fearful around the changes. But then there are other stories of people who are finding that because they've been forced to simplify, because they can't go out, they can't distract themselves with food and drink and entertainment, that they're finding something unexpected through the pandemic, a greater sense of joy, a greater sense of ease, as so much is taken away in terms of our habitual activities that in not spending money, there's a greater sense of contentment, if you will. And again, it's not for everyone, but for some people. A good friend of mine was doing a huge remodel on a house. And the house was going to be pretty amazing. In the interim, the whole family crammed into a tiny apartment because they just couldn't take living in the construction anymore. And they're all kind of jammed in there together, very, very small space. And I asked his daughter, I said, of all the places you've lived, what was your favorite place? And she said, that little apartment, that was my favorite. She said it was so simple and we were all really close together. So there's something very, very powerful around training ourselves to look for the good. Just as the wounds that are coming through in our culture right now are horrible, but on the other hand, they're being expressed. They're being seen. As Van Jones shared recently, a black man was lynched, and everybody cares. So when we choose to look for the good, when we ask ourselves, what's good about this? Or what could be good about this? Can I say yes to this? We're moving from contraction to new possibilities. And if you've ever had a time in your life when you have felt really, really challenged, chances are those were the moments of the greatest growth in your life. As difficult as it was, moving through those challenges opened up a greater sense of wisdom, a greater sense of skill, and a greater sense of satisfaction. And that becomes an integral part of meditation. It's learning how to get comfortable with discomfort. Learning how to recognize that when you are visited by one of these hindrances, when you're caught in judgment, anger, blame, fantasy, planning, restlessness and worry, heaviness, sloth, torpor, paralyzed by doubt, that celebrating the recognition of that state is so powerful. And then if you have the firepower, if you have mindfulness, if you have concentration, if you have energy, all these factors of awakening, if you can turn and sense the aliveness that comes from riding the wave of that discomfort, that sense of joy, really, the joy that says, I can be with this. Something in me is telling me this is important. I want to learn what this is about. I want to have tea with these demons. That factor is huge. Again, this practice is described as swimming upstream. You're swimming against your own conditioning. You're swimming against the entire culture. The joy comes when we sense what our path is, what your path is. Here's a little quote. If you like, you can close your eyes. Unalloyed joy comes to a person who ponders thus. Others may harm, but I will become harmless. Others may slay living beings, but I will become a non-slayer. Others may live unchaste, but I will live pure. Others may utter falsehood. I, however, will speak in truth. Others may slander, talk harshly, indulge in gossip, but I will talk only words that promote concord, harmless words agreeable to the ear, full of love, heart-pleasing, courteous, worthy of being borne in mind, timely, fit, and to the point. Others may be covetous. I will not covet. Energetic, steeped in modesty of heart, unswerving as regards to truth and rectitude, peaceful, honest, contented, generous, and truthful in all things I will be. Thus conducive to full realization, to perfect wisdom. This is the fourth enlightenment factor of piti, or happiness. If you like, you can deepen your breath and you can let your eyes open. Part of this path of awakening, and again, awakening is not a concept, it's not a metaphor. It's about being awake to reality. It's about waking your heart up in a way that it can hold everything and everything. When we are unskillful, we react to what is happening. We seek to control our lives. We seek to minimize pain. We seek to maximize joy. And quite often we do it based on the senses. When we really want to wake up, we recognize that part of the path means bringing all of our attention to what is not awake. And this becomes the paradox of joy. That rather than adding things to our lives, the joy comes in saying yes to what arises and letting go and letting be. So when you know what cultivates more long-term joy in your life, it can be very, very helpful in letting go of what's between you and feeling joy. This is part of the miracle of waking up. So if you like, you can close your eyes and take 3 long and slow, deep breaths. Take a moment to just a sense on the inside. What could relax? What could soften? Is it possible to say yes to your experience right now, to whatever is here? And again, it may not feel safe to say yes, but if you have that feeling, what do you notice? What do you feel? Can you imagine allowing more room in your life for joy and rapture of the body? To allow yourself to feel more relaxed. To allow yourself the upwelling of presence. Moments where there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, but just simply to be. And can you sense this quality of rapture and happiness, not of the body, but this mental quality of saying yes to life? Can you sense or imagine what it's like to simply, in this moment, say, I can be with this. I can make room for this. Choosing what you already have. Over the next 3 breaths, can you imagine that you could increase your capacity for joy in the body and joy in the mind? Can you imagine if just for a few moments your cup full and overflowing? And you might offer a little well-wishing to those first in your inner circle. May you feel joy. May you feel an upwelling of happiness. You might imagine it now moving out in widening circles. And you might, just for the next minute or so, bring into mind different people who spontaneously come to mind. And imagine that you could, from this place of radiant overflow, wish them well, and wish them ease. Can you imagine this now expanding out, the waves flowing out in all directions to all beings? All those that are under deep stress and suffering. Those who are anxious and fear. May all these beings feel their capacity for joy, for rapture, for happiness to open and expand. May all beings in all directions feel at peace, and feel joy and happiness and freedom. If you like, you can begin to deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. When you are undergoing challenge in your life, as we've been exploring in these talks, calling on your capacity to observe without judgment, establishing mindfulness. Establishing your capacity to be with what is here. To bring a quality of presence to whatever challenge is arising, to ask yourself if it feels safe to say yes. And then to make room for what is here. What is the lesson? Can you let it be? Can you let it go? And to track how rapture and happiness live in the body and they live in the mind. You can't make it happen, but you can cultivate the most optimal environment that you can. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. May you feel more and more of this upwelling of joy in your life so that you might be there for those in your life, to be of support, to be a presence, to serve in the deepest way that you feel called. Happy trails. Thank you for your time and for your attention. Many blessings.